What's up, sports history fan? Dana Augusta here of the Historically Speaking Sports Podcast. Ever wish you can get behind-the-scenes access to the Hockey Hall of Fame and dive into the untold stories that shaped the game? Then you need to check out Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories Part 2 by Eric Zweig. Eric's latest book is packed with wild, unexpected tales from epic rivalries and game-changing moments to quirky incidents like polo injuries and snowblower mishaps. Eric Zweig's impeccable research and passion for the sport of hockey will whisk you through the NHL's early years, the origins of the Three Stars tradition, and how hockey first hit the airwaves. Plus, you get fresh takes on legends like Wayne Gretzky, Bobby Hall, and Joe Sakic. Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2 is available now wherever you get your books. Grab your copy and get ready to dive deep into the heart of the game.
This day in sports history. And welcome back to another edition of This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. It's October 29th, and on this day in 1985, Michael Jordan broke his foot, an injury that turned out to be a little bit more serious than it sounded at the time. The Chicago Bulls were making their first road trip of the 85-86 season and playing on this night against Golden State. The Bulls had gotten off to a pretty nice start, winning their first 2 games of the year, including a 3-point win over a decent Detroit Pistons team. Jordan had scored 33 in that one, hitting 15 of 16 free throws. Now, this was year 2 for Jordan, and he was fresh off his Rookie of the Year performance and ready to turn the franchise into a playoff contender. Midway through the second quarter on this night, Kyle Macy threw a court-length pass to a streaking Jordan going in for a layup. But the ball was tipped and Jordan landed funny on his left foot. He felt the pain immediately and hobbled to the bench before being carried off the court back to the locker room. Initial x-rays were inconclusive, but after a CAT scan, an acute, undisplaced fracture of the navicular bone was revealed. So, while everybody talked about a broken foot, nobody outside of the Bulls knew how serious the situation was. The navicular bone of the midfoot has a very delicate blood supply, and fractures to it heal slowly if they ever do. For planting and jumping, say if you are a high-flying superstar basketball player going up for a dunk, well, the load is applied directly to the navicular bone every time, and it's put under a tremendous amount of stress every time. So, a pretty serious injury for any basketball player, but especially for the newest star of the NBA. Jordan blamed Nike and the shoes he was wearing on this night for the injury. Nike had just rolled out the Air Jordan 2, and MJ was not a fan, to the point where Jordan considered leaving Nike after this injury. In fact, Phil Knight was convinced that they'd lost him. Before his return, Nike set up a meeting with Mike and his parents. They rolled out the Air Jordan 3, and under the advice of his parents, Jordan stayed with Nike. The Bulls had also invested a lot of money in Jordan, and with the 85-86 season still part of the rebuilding process, they wanted him to stay off the foot, rehab it completely, sit out the remainder of the season, and come back in the fall of 86. But that's not what Jordan had in mind. MJ, ever the competitor, wanted to get back on the court quickly, and he grew frustrated at team doctors and management restricting any basketball-related activity. So he went back to Chapel Hill to rehab his injury, and after a few days of being back on campus, he started going to the gym and shooting around, and then some one-on-one, a little two-on-two, and he worked his way up to full-court 5-on-5 games. Now, nearly 40 years down the road, we know how all this turned out, but at this point in time, if he landed wrong, came down on somebody else's foot, rolled his ankle, or re-injured the navicular bone, then he's out even longer and possibly never able to come back and play the way he had. When he got back to Chicago, doctors noticed something funny. His left calf was stronger than his right. If he had been staying off his left foot and doing the rehab as he was supposed to be doing, that muscle should have atrophied a good bit. But as soon as they saw the strength, they knew what he'd been doing. Bulls owner Jerry Reinsdorf and general manager Jerry Krause were not happy with Jordan, and they wanted him to sit out for the remainder of the season. but Jordan ended up convincing them to let him play. So after sitting out 64 games, he was finally unleashed with 15 games left. He averaged 22 points a game in his return, with the Bulls winning 4 of their last 6 to sneak into the playoffs. Of course, that first-round matchup was against the Boston Celtics, with MJ's incredible 63-point performance in Game 2. On this day in 1999, it was a somber day at the PGA Tour Championship. This was the first tour event since the death of Payne Stewart and 5 others in a plane crash on the previous Monday. Hitting a little white ball with metal sticks seemed kind of silly for the 29 guys playing in the first round in Houston. Lots of tributes for Payne could be found around the course. Players wore black ribbons. Duffy Waldorf, who played alone since nobody filled Payne's spot in the tournament, inscribed his golf balls with words for Payne. Davis Love said there wasn't much joy on the course that day. It just didn't excite me. The fun doesn't last very long. It was more like work. Love was able to put together an impressive 27 holes on the day that included 2 monster birdie putts and a chip for another birdie to take the first round lead. But there was a moment standing over a 4-foot par putt that was more emblematic of his day. A plane carrying a banner reading, "We will remember you, Payne," caused Love to stand over and back off of his putt a few times in an attempt to corral his emotions long enough to actually hit it. Bob Estes paid tribute to Stewart on the first tee of the 466-yard par 4. Instead of a driver or an iron, Estes pulled out his putter on the tee, and he hit his opening shot about 15 feet, as a nod to the 15-foot putt Payne hit to win that year's U.S. Open. It is officially the shortest drive in PGA Tour history, and he ended up holding out for a double bogey on that one. Estes said after his round, "I wanted people to truly know how much Payne meant to all of us." While Tiger Woods dealt with his emotions prior to his rounds, it was physical pain that was a little bigger for him on this day. Tiger was playing his 23rd hole of the day when an errant drive put his ball behind a tree, nestled between a tree root and a baseball-sized rock. Now, if he moved the rock, the ball would move, incurring a one-shot penalty. If he took a drop, he'd still be behind a tree and looking at a bogey, and also a one-shot penalty. So he decided to play it, hitting the rock intentionally to try to get it into the fairway. The ball ricocheted in that general direction, but was still in the rough. But the impact with the rock caused a stinger in his shoulder and neck, and every shot he had after that caused him to wince in pain. But he still finished the round, just 1 shot behind Love. The tour took Friday off to attend Stewart's memorial service in Orlando, and that's the reason they played 27 holes Thursday. They came back to play 27 on Saturday to get to 54 holes. When it was all said and done on Sunday after 72 holes, Tiger Woods won by 4 shots over Love. Christian McCaffrey, remember that guy? He's been dealing with an Achilles injury since the end of last season, and he's yet to see the field this year as he continues to rehab. It looks like he's still about 2 weeks away before he's ready to return, but let's go back 12 months to what San Francisco's McCaffrey did on this day. With 3 minutes 19 seconds left in the first quarter, McCaffrey scored from 2 yards out to tie the score with the Cincinnati Bengals. That in itself is not surprising or amazing until you realize that it was the 17th consecutive game he had scored a touchdown, equaling the mark set by Hall of Famer and Baltimore Colt Lenny Moore in the 63 and 64 NFL seasons. McCaffrey scored on a pass reception later in the game, but the Niners came up on the losing end 31-17. The next week, San Francisco beat Jacksonville 34-3, but McCaffrey did not find the end zone, bringing an end to the streak. One record that he could break when he does return, though, is Marshall Faulk's record of 15 games scoring a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown. McCaffrey is currently tied with Faulk with 15. Let's hop on the time machine, crank it up, and go back to what happened on this day in 1921, when Harvard was considered a powerhouse on the gridiron. The Crimson had not lost a game in 3 seasons, unbeaten in 35 straight games. They'd tied 3, including the week before, but Nobody had outscored them. Tiny Center College from Danville, Kentucky, came rolling into Boston on this day. Center had an enrollment of just 274 students in 1921, but the Praying Colonels, as they were called back then, had a pretty good offense and a stout defense. Of course, college football at this point in history was a bit different, with the rules stating that players had to play both offense and defense. Now, the Colonels had already knocked off Clemson, Virginia Tech, and were fresh off a 98-0 thrashing of Transylvania College. They'd outscored their opponents 154-6 in their first 4 games, but Harvard was still heavily favored and were expected to roll to an easy win. These two had met the year before, with the Crimson cruising to a 31-14 win. Well, on this day, an estimated crowd of 43,000 people showed up to watch, and they saw a good one. The game was scoreless at the half. Then in the third quarter, Center QB Bo McMillan broke free around the left side, eluded all of the Harvard defenders, and broke the plane of the goal line for a 32-yard touchdown run. The Praying Colonels' defense held up, and Center's 6-0 win is considered to be one of the great upsets in college football history. Center went on to an impressive season. Their only loss that year was to Texas A&M in January, and a precursor to what would become the Cotton Bowl. Time now for today's Non-Sports Did You Know? Frank Sinatra was slated to play the lead role in the Dirty Harry movies. However, an injury that he sustained in the filming of The Manchurian Candidate prevented him from taking the role. In a fight scene in the movie, Sinatra injured his left pinky finger that prevented him from properly gripping the massive .44 Magnum gun that Dirty Harry carried. So instead, the part went to Clint Eastwood. That's all I've got for you today. I'll be back tomorrow for another go-round on this day in sports history. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.